The scream of a horse shouldn't echo across an empty valley. It shouldn't sound like a cry for help, but that's exactly what rancher Cole Bennett heard on that cold spring morning in northern Nevada. The sound sliced through the quiet desert air so sharply that Cole froze mid-step, his breath turning to fog as he tried to pinpoint where it came from. Something about that cry wasn't normal. It wasn't the panicked shriek of a spooked Mustang. It was the sound of an animal in real danger. A sound that made the hair on Cole's arms rise. Cole had been walking the east fence line of his 30,000-acre ranch, checking for winter damage. At 37, he'd spent most of his life fixing busted gates, mending broken posts, and chasing cattle that always seemed to find the one weak spot in the wire. But he knew horses. He'd been around them since he could walk. He knew what fear sounded like, and whatever made that scream, it was bad. He scanned the sagebrush flats until he spotted movement near an old section of fence bordering BLM land. Not the quick, graceful motion of a running Mustang. This was different, slower, heavier, like something fighting to break free. Cole's stomach tightened as he jogged toward the noise. When he crested a small rise, he saw her. A young Mustang mare, maybe 4 years old, trapped in a twisted mess of barbed wire. The rusty strands wrapped around her chest, shoulder, and front leg, biting deep into her flesh. She'd fallen at some point, probably while trying to jump an old fence line that hadn't been maintained in decades. Now she trembled with exhaustion, her dark coat slick with sweat and dust. Blood trickled down her leg in thin red lines. Her head lifted when she saw Cole, and he felt his breath catch. Her eyes, wide, wild, glossy with pain, locked onto his. Not with aggression, not with rage. Something else. Something closer to a silent plea. Most wild horses would have fought themselves to death trying to escape. But this mare had stopped struggling. She just stood there, shaking, sides heaving, as if she knew she couldn't get out on her own, as if she was waiting for someone to help. Cole's heart hammered as he got closer. "Easy, girl. Easy. I'm not here to hurt you." The mare flicked an ear toward him, but didn't try to bolt. Even tangled and bleeding, she held herself with a kind of fierce beauty. Lean muscles, long, dark mane, a sleek neck that spoke of generations of wild strength. But the wire had cut so deep he could see flashes of white tendon along her leg. Every breath she took came out in a rough shudder. Cole didn't waste time. He dropped to one knee and reached behind him for the heavy wire cutters he always kept in his back pocket. He knew he should call animal control. He knew approaching a trapped wild Mustang was dangerous. One well-aimed kick could shatter a man's ribs. But he also knew something else. If he waited, she'd die. Her breathing was too labored, her wounds too deep, her body too weak to endure another hour tangled in that cruel metal. "All right, sweetheart," Cole murmured, inching forward slowly. "Let's get you out of this." The mare trembled as he moved closer, her whole body tightening like a drawn bowstring. She could still lash out, still defend herself. Cole knew that, felt the danger buzzing in the air around them. But she didn't. She watched him, waiting, trusting him in a way that made his throat tighten. He reached the first strand around her chest and slid the cutter into place. His hand brushed her skin, and the mare flinched hard enough to shake the wire. Cole froze, holding perfectly still. "It's okay. I know it hurts." She blinked slowly, and for a moment her head lowered. Not much, but enough for him to see she was giving him permission. He cut the wire. The snap echoed across the valley. The mare let out a sharp cry and lurched sideways, nearly falling. Cole threw his weight backward, giving her space. For one breath he thought she might bolt or strike out. But she didn't. She steadied herself on 3 legs, chest heaving, pain shuddering through her muscles. "You're tougher than you look," he whispered. The next strand was worse. It had sliced deep into the flesh above her knee. Cole gripped the cutters tighter, swallowing hard. One wrong move, and he could make the injury worse. He worked slowly, carefully, sweat running down his face despite the cold air. The mare's leg quivered violently. Blood welled up around the wire. Last little push. Cole said softly. "Just hold on for me." He squeezed. The wire snapped with a sharp metallic crack. The mare screamed, a raw, guttural sound that tore through Cole's chest. She stumbled forward, suddenly free but unsteady, her injured leg trembling under her weight. Cole backed up, letting her decide what happened next. He expected her to flee. Any wild horse would have taken the chance to run, no matter how injured. But not her. Instead, the mare limped toward him. Slowly, carefully, as if she wanted to understand the man who had lifted her out of pain. She stretched her neck, her warm breath brushing his cheek. Cole stood completely still, hardly breathing. This wasn't normal. This wasn't instinct. This was trust. A wild Mustang, one that had every reason to fear him, was choosing to stand with him. But when Cole looked down at her wounds, his stomach clenched. Some cuts were deep, too deep. Her leg was swollen, bleeding. She was dehydrated, exhausted, vulnerable. If he left her here, she wouldn't survive the night. "All right, girl," he whispered. "We're not done yet." The mare lifted her head and looked straight into his eyes, as if she understood. That moment changed everything, because saving her from the wire was only the beginning. The real danger, the real mystery, was still waiting for Cole just beyond the ridge, in the shadows he didn't yet know he'd be walking into. The mare's legs shook as she tried to stay upright. Every breath came out rough and uneven, her nostrils flaring with exhaustion. Cole could see the tremble in her muscles, the way her body leaned ever so slightly toward him, like she didn't want to fall, like she didn't want him to leave her. He steadied her gently with one hand on her shoulder, careful not to spook her. Even through the dust and dried sweat, her coat was warm against his palm. "You're all right now," Cole murmured. "I've got you." But she wasn't all right. Not yet. Cole scanned her wounds quickly, his ranch-trained eyes taking in every detail. The cuts were deep. The bleeding was steady. Her leg was already swelling. If infection set in before he could treat her, she'd never survive. The Nevada range was harsh even for a healthy horse. For an injured one, it was deadly. He wiped his forehead with the back of his sleeve, then reached slowly for the small first aid kit he kept strapped to his belt. The mare watched him the whole time, not with fear, not with anger, but with the same steady look she'd given him when he cut the wire, the look of an animal trying to decide if a human could truly be trusted. Cole knelt beside her wounded leg. "This part's gonna hurt," he whispered. He opened a bottle of clean water, letting it trickle over the deepest cuts. The mare flinched hard. Her muscles bunched. A sharp breath tore from her throat. But she didn't pull away. She didn't strike. She stood firm, eyes locked on the man whose hands, gentle but firm, cleaned the dirt from her wounds. "You're stronger than you know," he said softly. When her breathing steadied a little, Cole layered a light bandage over the worst cut, just enough to slow the bleeding. He didn't have the supplies for real medical care out here. He needed to get her back to the ranch, and somehow he needed to do it without breaking the fragile trust she was giving him. He stood to his feet. "That leg can't carry you far," he said, "but I'm not leaving you out here." He took a slow, cautious step back toward the ridgeline where his truck waited. The mare lifted her head, eyes following him. Cole turned and began walking, giving her space, moving carefully so she could watch and decide for herself. After several steps, he heard a sound behind him. The soft, uneven shuffle of hooves. He glanced back. The mare was limping after him. Cole's chest tightened. Wild Mustangs were supposed to be untouchable, ghosts of the desert who trusted no one. But here she was, following him like she believed he was her only hope. And maybe, right now, he was. When they reached the ridge, Cole stopped beside his truck and old stock trailer. He opened the back gate and stepped aside, keeping his body in full view. "You want help?" he asked gently. "This is the way." The mare stood several yards away, breathing hard, her injured leg trembling. She lowered her head, studying the open trailer. Wild horses didn't load into trailers willingly. Ever. It went against every instinct they had. But something passed over her expression. Hesitation, fear, and then a softening that shook Cole down to the bone. She stepped forward. "1 foot at a time," Cole said. And she did. Her front hooves hit the metal floor with a hollow thud. She paused, trembling. But she didn't pull back. She lifted her injured leg, gritting through the pain, and made one last effort to climb inside. Cole eased the gate shut behind her, not slamming it, just clicking it into place. "You did good, girl. Real good." He jumped into the driver's seat, adrenaline still racing through him as he started the engine. The mare's shadow shifted inside the trailer. Cole could feel her presence behind him, fragile but determined. The drive back to the ranch was slow and careful. Every bump in the road made Cole glance nervously into the mirror, watching the trailer sway gently behind him. He talked to her the whole way, not because she could understand the words, but because he needed her to hear his voice. 20 minutes later, they pulled into his barnyard. His hired hand, Pete Miles, stepped out of the barn, wiping his hands on a rag. He lifted a brow when he saw the trailer. "You bringin' home more trouble again?" Pete called. Cole jumped out. She was tangled up in old wire on the east line. Legs bad, real bad. Pete shook his head as he followed Cole to the trailer. "You're gonna work yourself into an early grave, saving every creature that can't save itself." Cole didn't answer. He swung open the gate. The mare didn't try to run. She stepped out slowly, carefully, wobbling a little before she caught her balance. The sunlight hit her coat, revealing how thin she truly was, how many scars she carried, how much pain she was hiding. Pete whistled low. "Lord. She's a wild one, isn't she?" Cole nodded. "Not just wild. Something's different about her." They led her into a small healing pen behind the barn. Soft ground, shelter, clean water. Cole set out hay, but she didn't eat yet. She just stood there, watching him with those deep, intelligent eyes. "You need a name," he said quietly. Her ear twitched. Cole studied her strength, her scars, the fire still flickering behind her pain. "Spirit," he said finally, "you look like a fighter." And she did. Spirit lowered her head, as if accepting the name. But just when Cole thought the hardest part of the day was behind him, Pete pointed toward the horizon. "Boss," he said slowly, "you'd better look at that." Cole turned. A dark SUV was parked far off on the ridge, watching, not moving, just watching. A cold weight settled in Cole's gut. Something about this wasn't right. Something about this mare's injuries, and that vehicle, felt connected in a way he couldn't explain yet. And Cole Bennett, without knowing it, had just stepped into the middle of something far bigger than a rescue. The black SUV sat like a shadow carved into the horizon. No engine noise, no movement, just a presence, unnatural, patient, and wrong. Cole stood beside Spirit's pen, jaw tight, heart beating faster than he wanted to admit. Pete shifted uneasily beside him. "You know who that is?" Pete asked. "No," Cole said quietly, "but they sure as hell weren't just sightseeing." The SUV stayed there for another full minute, then rolled backward over the ridge and disappeared. Cole waited for the dust to settle before exhaling. He didn't like coincidences, and an unfamiliar vehicle showing up moments after rescuing a badly injured Mustang, that wasn't coincidence. That was someone checking on something. Or someone they expected to still be there. Someone didn't want this mare found. He turned toward her pen. Spirit stood with her head lowered slightly, eyes locked on the spot where the SUV had been. Not scared, not confused. Something else. Recognition. Cole swallowed hard. "What happened to you out there, girl?" Spirit took a shaky step, putting weight on her injured leg. Pain flickered across her face, but she didn't look away from the ridge. Not once. Cole knew horses didn't lie. They reacted, remembered, survived. And Spirit remembered something that frightened her enough to make her tremble, yet she still trusted him over her instincts. That said everything. For the next hour, Cole worked on Spirit's leg, cleaning, flushing, wrapping, talking to her the whole time in his calm, steady voice. She stood still through every painful touch, every tightening of the bandage. Most wild Mustangs would have kicked a man into the next county. Spirit didn't even pin her ears. "You got something in those eyes," Cole murmured. "Something you're trying to tell me." When he stepped back, Spirit lowered her head and pressed her muzzle lightly against his chest. Cole froze. Wild horses didn't do that. Pain forced her body to tremble, but the quiet trust in her gesture was strong enough to bring a heavy ache to Cole's throat. "You're safe here," he whispered. "I promise." That evening, the wind picked up, carrying a cold bite that hinted at a late spring storm. Cole stood on his porch, watching the sky darken as Spirit grazed carefully in her pen. The swelling in her leg worried him, but she'd made it through the afternoon without collapsing. That was a win. He took a sip of coffee, the steam rising against the chill. Pete stepped up beside him, rubbing his hands together. "You think that SUV'll be back?" Pete asked. Cole's jaw tightened. "Yeah, I do. Think we should call the sheriff?" Cole shook his head. "Not yet. Don't even know what I'd tell him." "Hey, Sheriff, I saved a wild horse, and now someone doesn't like it?" Quote. Pete grunted. "Fair enough." They stood in silence as the first drops of rain began to fall. Spirit lifted her head, ears flicking toward the sound. Cole stepped off the porch and jogged to her pen, pulling the tarp halfway down to give her extra shelter. She watched him with those deep, almost human eyes, trusting him even as thunder rolled in the distance. "You're gonna be all right," he said. "Rain'll pass." Quote. But as the storm moved through, something happened that made Cole's stomach twist. Out of nowhere, Spirit froze. Every muscle tightening as a faint rumble came from the sky. It wasn't thunder. It was rhythmic, mechanical, distant. A helicopter. Spirit let out a desperate, terrified cry and stumbled backward until she hit the fence. Cole rushed inside the pen. "Easy, easy, girl." But Spirit wasn't hearing him. Her eyes went wide, whites showing as she trembled violently. She pressed her head against Cole's chest, body shaking with pure panic. Her breathing turned rapid and uneven. This wasn't normal fear. This was memory. Cole wrapped his arms around her neck, trying to steady her. "You're safe. Nothing's gonna hurt you. I'm right here." The helicopter passed far overhead, eventually fading into the storm clouds. But Spirit didn't calm right away. She stood trembling for nearly 5 minutes, leaning into Cole like he was the only anchor she had left in the world. When she finally took a shaky breath, Cole stepped back and looked her in the eyes. "What did they do to you?" he whispered. That night, Cole barely slept. Every time the wind creaked the house or a distant coyote howled, he sat up and checked the window. Something about that SUV had set off alarms in his mind he couldn't quiet. He wasn't imagining this. Someone knew Spirit was out there. Someone expected to find her injured and trapped. Someone cared enough to come looking. At dawn, Cole went out to check on her. The mare lifted her head the moment she heard his footsteps, limping toward him with soft, relieved whinnies. Her trust was growing by the hour, something both beautiful and frightening. He cleaned her wounds again, examining every cut carefully. That's when he noticed it. A small, circular scar near her fetlock. Too clean, too deliberate, too precise. His breath caught. This wasn't from wire. It looked like something had once been attached there. A tag? A tracking device? He swallowed. "Spirit, what have you been through?" Before he could think further, Pete came running from the barn, breathless. "Cole!" he shouted. "You need to see this!" Quote. Cole hurried after him as Pete pointed toward the distant ridge. 4 dark SUVs were lined up along the horizon, not hiding, not driving away, waiting, watching. Cole's heart dropped into his stomach. This wasn't random. This wasn't curiosity. This was organized. Spirit wasn't just any wild Mustang. She was a witness. Something she saw, something she escaped, was dangerous enough that someone wanted her back. At any cost. Cole stepped between Spirit and the ridge, jaw set. "You picked the wrong horse," he murmured toward the horizon. "Because she's not alone anymore." And for the first time, Spirit pressed her head gently against his shoulder. Not in fear, but in gratitude. Cole Bennett didn't know it yet. But saving one Mustang had just put him on a collision course with something dark, ruthless, and far bigger than he could ever imagine.